He tweeted that, and then right after that, he tweeted this. To all of those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. Now, I think this is interesting. Look at how the company, Twitter, explains tonight why those two last tweets were enough to finally trigger a lifetime ban on this platform for President Trump. This is actually fascinating to me. Here's what they say.
I'm going to go rather quick right here. I'm just going to let you kind of go through it real quick, and then I'm going to flash point and go to the other one.
For close review of recent tweets from the @RealDonaldTrump account and the context around them, specifically how they're being received and interpreted on and off Twitter, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence. These two tweets must be read in the context of broader events in the country and the ways in which the president's statements can be mobilized by different audiences, including to incite violence, as well as in the context of the pattern of behavior from this account in recent weeks. We assess these two tweets under our glorification of violence policy, which aims to prevent the glorification of violence that could inspire others to replicate violent acts. And we determined that these tweets were highly likely to encourage and inspire people to replicate the criminal acts that took place at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. This determination is based on a number of factors, including President Trump's statement that he will not be attending the inauguration. That is being received by a number of his supporters as further confirmation that the election was not legitimate and is seen as him disavowing his previous claim that there would be an orderly transition on January 20th. The president's second tweet may also serve as encouragement to those potentially considering violent acts that the inauguration would be a safe target, as he will not be attending. Now, on that point, I have to say I had not...
Going to fast forward it.
Explaining why the president is permanently banned from that platform forever now, spelling out why his final two tweets were determined by the company to violate their glorification of violence policy. They say, quote, the use of the words American patriots to describe some of his supporters is also being interpreted as support for those committing violent acts at the U.S. Capitol. The mention of his supporters having a giant voice long into the future and that they will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form is being interpreted as further indication that President Trump does not plan to facilitate an orderly transition, and instead that he plans to continue to support, empower, and shield those who believe he won the election. Plans for future armed protests have already begun proliferating on and off Twitter, including a proposed secondary attack on the U.S. Capitol and state Capitol buildings on January 17th, 2021. As such, our determination is that the two tweets above are likely to inspire others to replicate the violent acts that took place on January 6th, and that there are multiple indicators that they are being received and understood as encouragement to do so. And thus, Twitter has permanent...
All right, let's move on to the next thing that she's got to say.
In their cars heading to Washington, D.C., the online forums where the neo-Nazis are welcome and where the president's supporters plotted openly this week how they intended to kill cops and maybe legislators and how they intended to take over and, in their words, occupy the Capitol building while they were there this week. Maybe the president will hop over into that little line of sewage where he can be among friends online.
All right, let's go forward.
Plan is this. Plan A, number one, she says they want the president to resign. If the president won't necessary body within Congress, so that if Vice President Pence and the cabinet choose to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president from power, Congress will be ready to play its part in that process.
This is all bizarre.
Except this time they may use a privileged resolution for impeachment, which is not the way they did it last time. That means, I think,
this is all bizarre. Let's go on. Now let's look at their draft. They made up a draft this afternoon.
Articles of impeachment against the president. I should say the draft article of impeachment that's circulating tonight in the House is fairly simple, to be honest. It's a single article of impeachment It's short. I'm going to read you most of the important part of it here in just a second. I have to tell you, personally, I think it could be even shorter and even States, and in violation of his constitutional oath faithfully to execute the office of president, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by willfully inciting violence against the government of the United States. On January 6, 2021, pursuant to the 12th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the Vice President, the House of Representatives, and the Senate met at the U.S. Capitol for a joint session of Congress to count the votes of the Electoral College. Shortly before the joint session commenced, President Trump addressed a crowd of his political supporters nearby. There, he reiterated false claims that, quote, "We won this election and we won it by a landslide." He also willfully made statements that encouraged and foreseeably resulted in imminent lawless action at the Capitol. Incited by President Trump, a mob unlawfully breached the Capitol, injured law enforcement personnel, menaced members of Congress and the Vice President, interfered with the joint session's solemn constitutional duty to certify the election results, and engaged in violent, deadly, destructive, and seditious acts. President Trump's conduct on January 6, 2021 was consistent with his prior efforts to subvert and obstruct the certification of the results of the 2020 presidential election. Those prior efforts include, but are not limited to, a phone call on January 2nd in which President Trump urged Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, to, quote, "find enough votes to overturn the Georgia presidential election results." The president threatened Mr. Raffensperger if he failed to do so. In all of this, the article of impeachment continues, President Trump gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government. He threatened the integrity of the democratic system, interfered with the peaceful transition of power, and imperiled a coordinate branch of government. He thereby betrayed his trust as president to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, President Trump, by such conduct, has demonstrated that he will remain a threat to national security, democracy, and the Constitution if allowed to remain in office, and has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law. President Trump thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States.
See, this is what happens whenever they wound up doing what they done back in January and February of this year towards playing with this guy, knowing that he had said something that was totally out of context pertaining to the Ukrainian government. Whenever Congress and the Senate plays along with basically rewarding bad behavior, and that's what they done. Even though they impeached him, they turned around and acquitted him. But they rewarded bad behavior. Anytime you create a monster like this monster immediately thinks that it can continue to violate and to break certain criterias and still be rewarded for bad behavior. So really and truly, the White House itself, the Senate and Congress, has no one to blame because of what that they have done here with Donald J. Trump. It's really, really sad. Sad to the very core of the American standard.